Hello again. The kids are back to work this week doing a complete brake job on that same Ford truck that had the parasitic drain problem, which has since been resolved. There's also a little more body work being done on that 69 Chevy Nova. Thanks for tuning in.
The customer is complaining of a grinding noise coming from the front of the vehicle. As you can see, there is a considerable amount of brake dust on the wheel.
I'll just keep going with it. On the top. There you go. There you go.
This is a race type rotor. We have to remove the bearing to remove the rotor.
First thing Edmar's going to do is remove the dust cap, and we can get to the cotter pin and the nut.
Take the whole thing out.
Yes, sir. Pull it towards you a little bit, it'll pop the bearing. Edmar's now going to pull the inner seal and bearing off. We've got the rotor back on. He's going to put the nut back in place a few turns. Then he's going to pull sharply down. And that should, there you go. That's going to keep the bearing and the seal on the spindle. Now we can remove the nut and then take off the bearing and the seal. And then we're ready to reuse that inboard bearing. This is the rotor from that Ford truck. You can see the deep gouges that were left in from the brake pad where, well, actually the pad was gone and it was up against the metal backing. And we could machine that out, but between this and the fact that the other side has this pitting, by the time we machined all of that out on the inboard and the outboard side, the rotor would have been a little too thin for me, so we've elected to put new rotors on. With the bearing cleaned up, we put it into the bearing packer, tapered side down, and we're going to press it to allow grease to come up through it until we have fresh grease coming from the back side. With the bearing packed and a new seal installed, the rotor goes back on. Then we'll put on the outboard bearing with our washer and nut, and then we'll get this adjusted. The first step in the bearing adjustment process is to get all of the free play out of the bearing by torquing it to a specific torque. Then we're going to back it off a couple of flats to relieve the pressure. Then we'll do a final torque with an inch-pound torque wrench while rotating the rotor, and that'll set the preload so that it still allows enough for the bearing to expand when it heats up and still have grease. That's it, right? To lubricate. Cool. With the
bracket's in place, the new pads go on, then the caliper, and you'll be ready for a test drive.
This is the same truck we did the front brake pads and the wheel bearing service and the rotors on. The pedal still didn't feel quite right, so we pulled the rear off. You can see that the wheel cylinder is leaking quite a bit, but also down here our star wheel adjuster is locked, so he's not getting any adjustment. So that's why the pedal is probably down a little bit. So we're going to get new wheel cylinders for this thing and shoes for both sides, and then we'll get those star wheel adjusters loosened up and lubed. Then we'll put all this back together, and not only will he have better brakes, he's going to have a much more responsive pedal.
We start out by removing the retracting springs. Then the brake shoe hold down springs. After that, he'll be able to pull the brake shoe assembly from the backing plate. To replace the wheel cylinder, he's first going to remove the brake line from the back of the wheel cylinder. Then he'll take out the bolts. Then he can pry it away from the backing plate. To install the new wheel cylinder, it first goes in through the hole in the backing plate. We'll tighten up the bolts, securing it, then hook up our line and get ready to bleed it.
I'm standing the bosses where the shoe is right against the backing plate. With the backing plate bosses sanded, I'm adding anti-seize so the shoes move freely.
Got the star wheel adjuster off of the Ford truck that was locked up. The threaded side is working fine, but the side that spins, the free spinning side, is locked up tight. So I'm going to set this in the vise, I'm going to break this free, get it lubed up, put it back on the truck. Back the other way.
Here they're using a special tool to release the clip that secures the brake shoe to the parking brake ball.
This is a wave washer. As you can see by how it's bent slightly, it's not deformed. That's how it's supposed to be. This is going to go between the horseshoe clip and the secondary brake shoe, and that's what's going to put tension against it so that it doesn't vibrate loose. So you have to make sure that this wave washer is installed, or else the clip could come out of the secondary brake shoe, and that would not be good.
I'm crimping the retainer that holds the secondary shoe to the parking brake leg.
You see we've added new cables for the star wheel adjusters as well to keep the tension tight on it, because they do stretch over time. So we've got two new cables on each side as well. So now it's time to get the shoes adjusted, get the drums back on. Jorge's using a brake shoe adjuster. He's checking the widest distance on the drum with the internal part of the caliper. Then he'll transfer it over to the shoes, where he'll move the star wheel adjuster out till he gets a little bit of resistance, and that's a good initial setting for the brake shoes. Now that everything's all back together, Jorge's going to start bleeding it.
The vacuum process started. We're looking to remove all of the air from our new wheel cylinders, pulling brake fluid through the lines from the master cylinder. And once all the air is out, we can put the wheels back on and be ready to go.
With the replacement box, we check to make sure that all the fuses and relays are in the correct places.
Now I'll be swapping the gem module onto our new box. With everything changed over, we're ready to put it back in the truck.
Along with all the brake work that was done on this truck, the students also got the replacement fuse box put in, and I'm happy to report we are down to just a little over 50 milliamp, which is fine for this vehicle, so he shouldn't have to worry about the battery going dead on him anymore. We took the old fuse box and started pulling it apart to see how bad the corrosion really was, and you can tell as we started going layer by layer, it gets worse as we go along. So this thing would have, if it hadn't created this problem now with the parasitic drain that it had, it would have been some bigger issues down the road.
In grinding the Nova hood, I found somebody made a rust repair using body filler. I'm going to fix it correctly. I'm cutting out a piece of this hood to use as a repair panel for the Nova hood.
Next time on Bulldog Builds, the students get back to work on that 48 Chevy by putting the steering box back together. And we're going to show you why we're going to replace the exhaust valve on the Chevy cylinder head. See you next week.